Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Backstage Bikini podcast with your hosts, Grace and Jade. And today we have an absolutely exceptional guest in our view. It's an absolute honor to welcome Jami Bernard to the podcast. She is the owner, the head, the mama bear, as we know, of FitBody Fusion. She's an IFBB Pro herself and just one of the leading coaches, one of the leading advocates for the bikini division. It is nothing shy of an honor, Jami, to have you on. How are you? Thank you for coming on and tell us about how you are.
It's an honor to be here. I'm so happy to be here. I love your podcast. I think it's amazing. I love what you guys are doing. And I think, having more content out there where people can learn and grow and find out more about the sport that's positive and uplifting is like, I'm all for it. So I'm doing great. I'm actually on a little mini vacation with my family. So quick little vacation between two pro shows. So
a little bit of rest amongst all of the high, I think, is needed because you and your athletes are just like shining show to show. So you need it. You need that downtime as well. But I suppose, as I said, it's such a pleasure to have you on and thank you for your time. But Jami, will you tell us a little bit about how you actually got into the sport, your interest in bikini, and also with coaching as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way I got into the sport, gosh, this goes back to the 80s. So I always love to tell this story because really, it was only men's bodybuilding. And then in the 80s, women's building came on the scene. And it was really exciting. And it was kind of funny because back then, the women worked out in a different area. We had pink machines. We didn't have free weights, it's just kind of funny how that happens and how it's evolved now. And now I would say there's probably more female competitors on the whole than even male competitors now, which is really cool. We have multiple divisions and all this kind of thing. But when I first started, I was going to compete in women's bodybuilding. I actually did powerlifting for a little while. Kind of cheerleading in high school and met somebody who had a female powerlifting team, so that was a lot of fun. And I just loved lifting weights. I loved feeling strong. I feel like it built so much confidence for me to feel strong and feel capable and that kind of thing. So it really just became a lifestyle for me and something that I'm super passionate about. Then the first female division other than women's bodybuilding that came on was fitness. So I was later on going to compete in fitness, tore my hamstring. I was like, maybe not. I was a little older when I started doing it.
Ouch.
But with that cheerleading background, I was like, let's give it a shot. So figure came on the scene. And so that's what I ultimately ended up competing in, as figure. And I had just an amazing time. It was such an incredible journey. I didn't really get serious about competing till my late 30s. So I turned pro at 40 and did the Olympia at 40 and 41. So at that point, I knew for me, it was kind of like I wanted to compete till I was like 45. And then I started coaching more and more and fell in love with that. And so now that's really, I know people sometimes ask me, are you going to compete again? I get some people teasing me to go do the Masters Olympia and stuff like that. But I'm so passionate about coaching and I love my athletes so much that that's fulfilling for me. So I don't see myself going back to doing it personally, but I really enjoyed the whole journey.
That's an amazing age as well. And I think even we have, we speak to a lot of people on this podcast, and I think age is a big thing. Especially with bikini, that people think there's like a timestamp as well on it. And I guess there is to a degree, but it puts people a lot like, going into their 30s from competing. Do you get this a lot, like with your athletes, with their age and stuff? Do you find that kind of a bit of a barrier with some people?
I think it's more of a mental barrier than anything. And I really think it's interesting in that, this sport is for anybody of any age, and sometimes I'll meet 60-something-year-olds that are doing their first show. I'm like, how freaking cool is that? Like somebody, has decided like, hey, I'm not done. I can still do this. And I remember, kind of going through it mentally with myself, even when I started, and kind of discounting myself because of my age. So yeah, I definitely I really encourage people, if you're passionate about doing this, like it really doesn't matter your age, And we've seen athletes in their 40s, up on the Olympia stage. And now we have the Masters Olympia too, which is amazing. I pushed for that so long. I was like, come on, guys, give the Masters athletes like a pinnacle to reach for. So I was so excited when that came out. That was really, really cool.
Incredible.
And I think that's the pattern that we've seen over this time, hasn't it? I mean, obviously, Jami, you starting in the 80s versus now, it's the pattern is slowly but steadily evolving over time to be more and more inclusive. There's more categories. We have obviously the wellness category now. Now we have the Masters Olympia. The whole idea is to be as inclusive as possible and to make it as accessible as possible. And we'll dig into sort of, especially bikini in terms of accessibility. But do you find any sort of obstacles for your athletes in terms of accessibility to the sport now versus then, in your sort of experience, in terms of what we have available to us now and how accessible the sport is? Do you see that as a challenge or as an opportunity, or are you is there two sides to it?
Oh, I mean, opportunity, 100%. Like the organization has done a phenomenal job of growing and evolving as we've all grown and evolved. And, both adding new divisions, adding different categories. We added the true novice. Now this year they're adding natural shows and, into the mix. I feel like they're constantly evolving and learning and growing and figuring out how to best serve our community in a way that does include everyone. There's more masters categories, there's more age groups, just more and more opportunities for people to find where they fit, and, one of the big things, I really encourage people is like, enjoy every stage of the journey. I think sometimes people are so quick to get to the end and, just whether it be your very first show at a local level or whether it be your very first time at nationals or if you're an Olympian, like, each one brings its challenges and its joys and heartaches and all of the things. But, at the end of the day, the opportunity is really personal growth. Like it's allowing us to challenge ourselves in a way that's, requires everything, like discipline, dedication, passion. Like we have to tap into those deepest levels of ourselves to be able to bring our best to stage. But no, I mean, as far as like the opportunity, it's light years from where I started.
Yeah. And even I suppose talking specifically with bikini, like the amount of shows and the amount of athletes within the shows and the standard as well. Like we talk about it all the time in the podcast, like with other coaches, that even 10 years ago, like we didn't have the standard number of athletes that we have now. So I suppose bring us back to like when you got into coaching, what drew you to bikini and where did you start with that?
Well, when I initially started coaching, I was primarily coaching figure, and bikini was so brand new. And when bikini first started, I mean, it was really kind of like, a girl who likes to do cardio and like hang out on the beach came and stepped up on the stage, and it was like beautiful girls with, beautiful physiques and things like that. But it certainly has evolved in terms of just the level of athleticism and muscularity and things like that. So I compare really today's bikini kind of closer to when I did figure. 2011 is when I turned pro in figure, and I've put my pictures from that show next to my athletes competing now, and it's very similar. So I think that's why I've evolved very much into, coaching bikini, because, the posing's obviously different. There are aspects of it that are different, but I think the physiques are pretty similar to, when I was doing figure.
So maybe go back and do masters bikini.
I would not even like in a million years, they would laugh me off that figure stage. But I mean, the funny thing is when I was competing, like my feedback was usually too much muscle, too conditioned, too, you know what I mean? I had to like I did so many national shows to get my pro card. And every time they said, oh, you're going to be great as a pro. And I'm like, if I could ever get there, so it was really interesting. Yeah, it was really interesting, like figuring that formula out for myself so that I could, but once I turned pro, I was in the top 5 of all my pro shows through my second Olympia. So they were right. It just was one of those things where, and I was older, and that's part of the reason I think I was carrying a little bit more muscle density, and I could tend to look a little harder because I was, 40 versus somebody who's, in their 20s, and they're going to have a softer, rounder, kind of more bubbly look.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you find, because you've touched on the evolution there, Jami, like we note it, we speak about it quite openly, because I think there is a fine line between acknowledging that in like that evolution over time in terms of muscularity and the physique development that the bikini division has shown, but also a fine line between that and also going that little bit too far and sort of misunderstanding the level of muscularity actually required for the division itself. So we talk a lot about that and the accessibility of the sport. Do you find athletes out in the USA or anybody across the world that approaches your coaching brand, do they have preconceptions? How do you find that presentation? Do they understand the category? Do you have to do much work to manage their expectations around what the category actually demands now?
I have to do some. I mean, I would say more frequently I'm educating people who want to go wellness or figure, that maybe they don't have the structure for it, or the amount of muscle is going to take them quite a long time to build, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
I encourage people, like, you want to look the way you want to look, you want to train the way you want to train. So you
Yeah.
want to take everything into account. Like, what physique do I feel comfortable both in season and off season in? Do I want to be able to really, really do a lot of compound movements and things like that? Whereas bikini, we're not doing a whole lot of that. Once we get to that higher level, we have a lot of muscle. It's very fine tuning sort of training. And for some people that doesn't resonate. They feel like they've been, they've lost the thing that they're passionate about, maybe the way that they like to train. So that's a thing. And then, what does their actual structure and their body lend itself to? So if somebody's got, the wide clavicles and really nice insertions for their lats and things like that, I've had people like that have these amazing upper bodies, but, still need to work on their lower bodies, and they come in and they want to do wellness. And I'm like, are you sure? This is not really, your structure. Yeah. Your structure really lends itself more to figure, if that, if that's more the route you want to go. So I think the education sometimes can just be more helping people kind of gel together, where their potential lies with what they like the look of, and, how they like to train. But, I think that, when you look at like the like novice, true novice, amateur level versus the pros, like there's a huge gap, and it should be. I mean, this is a progression. People when they first start, they should be able to do a local show without having a ton of muscle, but have a beautiful look and stage presence, and enough, muscle and things like that. But then you continue to work at it and build and evolve up through the ranks. So, I do think a lot of times people will look at that top tier level and go, oh my God, that's too much, or whatever. And first of all, a lot of times people haven't seen it in person, which I loved the way that Tyler covered that in his review of Pittsburgh, because, you got Amy who's 113 pounds on stage, or Maria who's 102 pounds on stage. You know what I mean? And then people are like, oh, it's so huge. It's really not. It's just that when people have really small joints and nice, round, full, bubbly muscle, it gives the illusion of size. And then when you see them in person, you're like, oh, okay, they're not that big. So I think sometimes people get confused about that. And I encourage them, go in person. I was actually watching the breakdown you guys had of Pittsburgh with Marnie, and she talked about being there last year and being, next to the other athletes, and getting to see, like, what does that size look like in person. And I think that's really helpful, because otherwise, if you're just going off pictures, you really have no idea.
100%.
No, there's no context there, is there? There's no context to the size of these athletes. And even with like the weight helps, but I think visually we are a very visual sort of generation now. Everything is accessible online. Everything's accessible on Instagram and social media. You see these shows so much more than you would have done in the 90s or even in the early 2000s. We simply didn't have the access to it back then, whereas now it's more accessible. So I suppose it's easier to perceive the demands of the physiques at that level to be completely either miles and miles ahead, or potentially for somebody, an athlete or a coach, to project ahead of that, thinking that they need more and they need more, and without the context applied in actually looking at the bodies in person, completely overshot bikini. And it's very hard to pull it back then, isn't it? It's very hard to pull that physique back.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I actually was talking about this with somebody earlier. Whenever I turned pro, I jumped right into my first pro show literally weeks later, and I watched some of the athletes I turned pro with think, oh, I need to be so much bigger, so much bigger, so much bigger, like that perception, and then come back and overshoot the mark. And now they're trying to bring it back down. And I mean, we've seen this with some of the bikini athletes as well that come in a little bit too big, and then the judges feedback. And then in order to get small, especially in a short period of time, then they're coming in really depleted looking. So now they lose some of that roundness and shape. So yeah, it really is important to make sure you're kind of staying within that range of that criteria, so then you can kind of play with things a little bit more. You know, I actually had one of my athletes, she just got second this past weekend at Clash, Yulia Baba. She went to the Olympia last year, and you know, she just builds, and this girl works so hard. We came in a little too hard this year, and it really was one of those things where I had to figure out the formula. And then this last show, I feel like we finally kind of nailed it. So we're bringing in that fullness and roundness without her looking a little bit too hard. She's naturally genetically a very vascular person. So all these things are challenges. We don't want to see that a bikini. We don't want to see striations. We don't want to see vascularity. You know, we just want to see nice round full muscle bellies with a little bit of separation. But it's really easy to overshoot.
Yeah.
I think like you said, with the training side of things and muscularity, like you have to be really, really smart. And we speak about it on the podcast all the time. We're still kind of catching up with how the US go about things with training. We recently spoke with Jade and I's coach about, you know, just like really, really heavy deadlifting and things that are not going to be, you know, best suited for your erectors and, you know, obliques and things like that. And I think your athletes, like, the proof is in the pudding. What you're doing is right. So talk us a little bit about your training and how you go about this for different athletes. I know when we spoke to Amy, I'm still really, really interested by how she went about things last year. I think she took a big long break, didn't she, from training as well, and just to kind of refresh her body. So how do you go about the training side of things with your athletes?
Everybody is so different. You know, it's kind of interesting because when Amy and I first started together, she was so tiny. And I said, we're going to take a whole year to grow. Like, you need time, you need to grow. She actually worked with a personal trainer that was local to her, who really pushed her, just because she really didn't know like what she was capable of. She needed somebody to kind of help her realize that. But she's such a hard worker and such like an intensely focused person that within 6 months we were on stage, and then she got sixth at the Olympia that year. So, which is like mind blowing. You know, and I would tell people that when I do a consult with them initially, is like, I'm telling you what I'm seeing and I'm kind of giving you a general idea of what my expectations are, but people surprise me sometimes, and sometimes one way, sometimes the other. You know, so each person is a little bit different. In her case, you know, we definitely did need to go, because she builds muscle very easily. So she builds it everywhere. So that means, you know, her waistline, you know, built muscle. So we had to really fine tune and rearrange her workouts a lot just to make sure everything was really isolating. But, you know, some people need to do a little bit more of the compound movements. It really kind of depends on where the person is in their journey, how much muscle they still need. But I don't coach a lot of amateurs anymore. Maybe 10 to 20% of my roster are amateur athletes, and the rest are all pros. So most of them are at a higher level of training. So when I'm working with them, it's very much fine tuning, more so than it is you just need muscle all over kind of thing, you know. And then I do work with one of my coaches who's a master trainer. So a lot of them do fly in to see me in Arizona, where we do a posing analysis, a movement analysis, and then an analysis of the way they're training, because I can give somebody the best training plan in the world, but if their execution isn't good, or you know, that particular exercise may not just lend itself to the person's structure. I may have some really tall athletes, for example, and depending on, you know, the equipment they have and things like that, maybe certain exercises don't work as well for them. So I think it's really about figuring out what's going to work for the individual based on, you know, how their body moves and what areas they need to develop, what areas they may need to bring down. I mean, Jordan Brandon, when I started with her, you know, the quads were really overpowering. We needed to bring those down, bring the glutes density up. We actually, back then we were thinking about wellness because it was brand new. And she could have grown into it, but loved bikini. We wanted to stay there. And so we've done a really good job with her of being able to fill out and build the density of her glutes without, you know, increasing the size of her legs. The real challenge, because there's so many exercises you can't do. So, you know, I mean, there's so many different examples of, you know, different ways and different approaches. And I think it can't be a one size fits all.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
would argue it's more
absolutely.
difficult to kind of reverse when, like you said, you're working with more pros. They come to you, they might have been working with a different coach who maybe didn't have those kind of specifications with training. And it's like having to kind of reverse all that is really difficult because they might need to build their glutes. And it's like how to go about things. You have to be just so smart with your programming because you get an amateur, yeah, like you said, they might just need to build a lot of muscle, but working with the pros and that fine tuning is a lot more difficult. Or do you find yourself more and more faced with those kind of barriers with coaching pros?
That's what's fun to me. It's like coaching amateurs is like playing checkers, and coaching pros is like playing chess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you have to be so much more strategic with everything you do. And that includes mindset. I think that a big mistake I see coaches making is not taking that into account. And it's like they have this program that they've built that they think is the best. It's the best program. And maybe it is the best program. But if it doesn't fit, I had one athlete, she's one of my Olympians, 2-time Olympian. She got top 15, her first Olympia, Eureka Shimoto. When
Yes.
she came over to me, she was a nurse. She was working these swing shifts. Like she wasn't, and the program she had been put on, she had to train for like an hour and a half a day. Then she had another hour and a half of cardio. She was like 20 something weeks out. She was eating 1,200 calories. She wasn't dropping. Like she was just like a mess. And so I started to reverse her. I
Yeah.
brought down the cardio. I decreased her training days, no training on days that she was working those long shifts. And immediately her body started to respond. So it wasn't that coach's program was wrong or bad. That coach just didn't take into account that this particular athlete she was getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. Like her body just wasn't responding. So I think like being able to like I said, like kind of look at it from that chess standpoint of like, how do I back off from the situation, take everything into account that's going on with this athlete, and then come to the table with something that's going to work for them. I mean, most of my athletes are like, this doesn't even feel like prep, like from what they've done before to what they're doing with me. And a lot of the time it is because I'm working with how can I create this situation. So, I mean, it's going to be hard. Like, it's hard.
Yeah.
We all
Of
know
course.
that.
It's never easy.
Right. I mean, if it was easy, we would all look like we were ready to step on stage, cruising down
Exactly.
the street every day. It's going to be hard. But like, can I do anything to make it a little bit, even just a tiny bit easier on them mentally, emotionally, physically? Like that might be, like they respond to me. I'm not getting a pump. I'm just like really in my head. Like, let me just give you a refeed. Let me give you a mental break for a minute here. And sometimes, man, that body just wakes up, their mind wakes up. Now they feel refreshed. They can keep pushing. So, I think it's that ability to listen and to figure out like what's going to work best for that individual so that I don't start to lose them. And you'll see like my athletes can compete a lot. And that's why like they're not starving. They're not doing an insane amount of cardio. I'm not saying never, like sometimes we have to get low. Sometimes we have to do a little bit more cardio. But once we get there, I'm reversing them from show to show. I mean, most of the time they're eating 2,000 plus calories when I'm going show to show to show. I mean, they're not starving by any means. So I think that's how I'm able to accomplish that.
I think you've touched on something really important there, and we love to talk about the mindset, because I think, like you've said, Jamie, and it's bang on, the diet and the training and the schedule, and you can get all of that right, but an athlete can still struggle mentally. And I think especially with the level of athlete that you have on your coaching roster at the moment, the pressures that those athletes must face in terms of personal growth, personal like achievements, and the goals that they're setting for themselves. The likes of Amy, who has literally taken the pro scene by storm within a year, 2 years. She's just flown right to the top. How do you manage that mindset, especially with, I know you've got fewer sort of amateur athletes at the moment comparative to the pro athletes that you've got, but how do you manage the mindset? Does it differ? Is there much of a difference between what they face, and how do you support your athletes in that, because it's such a crucial part of the entire thing?
Yeah, I mean, everyone truly is different. And I think a lot of it is listening. I know that, I mean, I had a few coaches, personally through my career. And when I'm coaching, I'm thinking about what would have made me the best version of myself, and in some cases, it just feeling heard, feeling like the person cares and is, about the whole thing, not just about, what did I eat this week, but, how am I doing? Like, am I going through something? I mean, whether somebody's going through a breakup, they got a new pet, which I hate when people do that during prep, but a lot of times they do.
Don't get a pet now, prep. Don't do it.
The puppy's eating everything. I'm stressed.
That's great advice.
I'm in school full-time, working a full-time job, prepping. I think I'll get a dog. That sounds like a good idea.
I did that. I can confirm. Not good. Not good. The training goes out the window.
I know. I think we're all very type A people that are attracted to this. So like the fact that we like to pile on the plate, so, as a coach, I feel like, it's my goal to really help try to keep them as focused as possible, to kind of pay attention to the warning signs when they're getting burned out, when they're getting overloaded. Creating a safe space where they'll be honest with me. I do feel like there are coaches out there, and I've experienced this, where it wasn't a safe space to like be honest, like, hey, I messed up this week, I did this. So either feeling like the coach doesn't care, or the coach is just mad, or, coming down like you're such a screw up or whatever, I do think that like in the short term, sometimes being really tough on people can help, but in the long term, it can drive people down. And over time, like feeling beat up for so long, they start to feel so small and so not capable that they start to embody those kinds of qualities that maybe weren't there before. So, to me, it's like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And if something's not right, like, I mean, it's funny to me because I think I'm so nice and easygoing, but like when I give them the compliment, finally, they're like, Jordan, when she won Tahoe Pro the last year, she literally collapsed on the ground when I told her she was spot on. We have it on video. She collapsed on the ground, and I was like, oh my God, have I not given you enough compliments? But it's just like, I'm also not going to lie. I'm not going to blow smoke up somebody's butt and tell them that that they have a shot at winning if they don't. Like if I have somebody who's there and I'm like, hey, look, we look really, I'm not going to put them on stage if they don't look great, but I'm like, we look really good, but here's what the competition is, or here's the things we still need to work on. So, maybe we're going into the show, let's say Maria at the Pittsburgh, right? We were going in to get feedback from that top level of judges. We knew we had a good shot at qualifying this year.
Yeah.
We weren't expecting to win Pittsburgh, but her falling into that 4th place spot was pretty freaking awesome when, she hadn't been to the Olympia, and she beat, what was it, 13 other Olympians or whatever. So,
it was 22, wasn't there? 22 at that. Was there 22 athletes?
22 total, but I think 14 were Olympians.
Or something like that. It was like well over 50%. Yeah.
Yep. And then we finally got our win this past weekend. So it kind of set us up and teed us up for, for that ultimate win in that Olympia qualification. But like, I'm always going to explain like, hey, going in, this is our goal. This is what we're coming for. This is what we can expect. So they know they can trust me when I say something. I'm usually right, because I'm not just saying it just to say it. And, I'm at every single show every single weekend. So I'm able to see in person, talk to the judges, understand what they want to see, what they're looking for. If I have an athlete that isn't placing where I think they should, then I'm digging. I want to see, like, what specifically are you seeing? I had this with Yulia where they were saying, she just isn't popping. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, give me more. Like, is it the hair and makeup? Is it the tan that isn't just it? What is it that's not resonating? And so when we nailed it this past weekend, and it was in front of the judges that said that, and they said, you brought the pop. I was like, yes. So we changed her tan, we changed her suit, we changed her makeup and hair, like we changed everything, like just brought the glam and and really nailed it. So I was super happy with that. But that's, for me, that's the thing, is like I'm digging. What do I need to know? What do I need to get right? How can I make this better? I'm
at that level, and that's why you are the coach that you are with the athletes, that you have to do that digging. You have to have a little bit of tough love at times and realism with your athletes, but also I think you have that balance with compassion, and there's a reason why your athletes call you, Mama Bear. They have a very close relationship with you, and that's experience at the end of the day. I think there's a lot of coaches that are quite harsh because maybe they're bodybuilding coaches, they have that background and that's how males like to work, but bikini athletes are just totally different, and you've been in the game long enough to probably learn that too as well. So you definitely, would you say that you have like quite a close relationship with all of your athletes? I know with Amy in particular, like she's just always, always singing your praises. But do you think that's a big reason why the athletes are so successful, is because you're that close with them as well?
I do think that has a big part to do with it, is they know how dedicated I am, how much I care about them truly as people. So I mean, if that means, you know, we need to do a health check and we need to take a step back, or, you know, if they're stepping away from the stage because they want to have a kid or whatever, like I'm so fully supportive. You know, it's not just about the win. It's not just about what we're doing on stage. Like I truly care about them and their happiness and their health and, you know, mentally, physically, all of that. And I think that, you know, them knowing that, and, you know, me being in their corner and really believing in them and supporting them and fighting for them, I do think it helps. I really do. I think, you know, we all need that. We all need to feel that. And it's really cool too, because I mean, I'll include everybody. Like if, you know, their husbands or boyfriends, their, you know, their parents, if they're coming to the shows, or their kids, or, you know, I'm really making sure that I'm, you know, supporting the family and like building a team, you know, around them. So
yeah. This is the thing as well. I think what's so important as well, and we speak about longevity a lot in the sport, in terms of the you can come into this sport with so much compassion and so much passion for wanting to achieve X, Y, and Z. So many things get in the way of the longevity of that sort of experience. Physiological issues, obviously we're aware now that there's a higher demand in terms of muscularity. People are making quick decisions about their physiques and sometimes lacking patience. But then equally, if you're not experiencing that, what you've just described, that level of support, that level of understanding, that level of sort of sportsmanship, not just with your fellow athletes but your coach as well, and that encouragement, it can quickly diverge into a complete sort of 180 out of the sport, and a lack of enjoyment. Do you find a lot of your athletes have that longevity, Jamie? Do they stay longer? Are they able to enjoy the sport and absorb it more and be present when they are competing?
I really do. I really, really believe, yes, that that is absolutely the case. And, you know, again, like I go back to like when I was competing, and I always tell people like, any medal or trophy or award or whatever doesn't hold a candle to the relationships that I built throughout along the way. And I mean, a lot of those relationships I still have today. You know, a lot of the judges I used to compete with, or the promoters, or, you know, I've known these people like my family. Like it's literally like a reunion every single time I go to a show. And so that's what's so special to me and truly keeps me in this industry, is the people are so wonderful. And I've worked really hard to build community and foster that within the community, just not in my relationships with my athletes, but, you know, the fellow coaches on our team, you know, the other athletes with each other. I mean, and you'll see just how supportive they are of each other, you know, and everybody's there to win. We're all there. Every single individual is there to bring their best. And, you know, people ask me a lot of times, like, how do you handle it? Because sometimes I'll have 5 to 8 pros in a show, and they're like, how do you handle that? Like, obviously not everybody can win. It's, you know, I look at each individual and I go, how can I bring you in your very best? How can I fight for you in every way I possibly can to, you know, do the best you can possibly do on this particular day? And then at the end of the day, it's up to the judges. And, you know, it's, we're all doing our best to bring our best. And then, you know, we have to then, you know, once all is said and done, you know, be happy for the outcome, and look at it as like, okay, this is my opportunity to learn and grow. This is my opportunity to get feedback and continue to get better, you know? And so I think that it has resonated with the team. And when I see them supporting each other, it's so special. I mean, we create a WhatsApp group for every show for our athletes to communicate with each other. So they share rooms, they help each other with their tans. They, you know, they go to dinner together after the shows. Like it's just, you know, it's so cool to see that level of support. And I do think that it benefits everyone. It keeps cortisol levels low because they're enjoying their time together. You know, it's the whole hurry up and wait. We're sitting, do all this stuff, and we sit backstage forever, and you're, you know, nerves can get the best of you. But when you're surrounded by people that you feel like comfortable with and care about you, I feel like then your nerves you stay more relaxed, you have more fun, you know, and look, at the end of the day, for most of us, this is a hobby. So if we're not having fun, like, why would we keep doing it?
Yeah.
I guess I'm so fascinated by like the amount of athletes that you do coach, and how you're able to just focus on individuals. 'Cause sometimes you've athletes, you know, competing against each other, and that must be hard. But like you said, you just have to give your all into each, and at the end of the day, it's up to the judges. But I always thought, like, is there competitiveness amongst the athletes themselves? And it's amazing to hear that they do have a relationship and they are kind of supportive of each other, because otherwise you just, like we spoke about mindset, you just really get in your head, especially when we're on the same team, coached by the same person in the same show. Like, that must be hard. So it's good to hear that they're able to kind of separate themselves from it and just enjoy their time. But do you ever get situations with your athletes where they might get in their head about, you know, coming up against another FitBody Fusion athlete, or is it all kind of quite amicable?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, of course. I mean, we're all human, and that's okay. You know, I don't think that anybody's not going to have those moments. But the nice thing is that because we do have so many pros competing, not just that I'm coaching, but that a lot of times that my other coaches are, you know, like this weekend at Miami, I think Shelby's got 3 pros and I've got like 4, you know, so like 7 total for the team, that kind of thing. But some of the benefits are, you know, when there's multiple shows on one day, we also can coordinate who's going where, which is very nice because we're going to give everybody the best opportunity, put them next to the people we think are going to be best for them. Also, because we're bringing in a similar level of conditioning and fullness and overall look and things like that, it helps them to compare better. So, you know, there's pros and cons, you know, for sure. And I'm very strategic, you know, because I know everybody's got a finite amount of money and time and energy that they can dedicate towards shows. So being really strategic with where I'm putting people, you know, who's going to be there, and, you know, that I think is a really big benefit. So that's kind of outweighs the other side of it, is that, like, yes, you know, your teammates are going to be there, you know, they look really good, but hey, that means you got to be on your game. You can't be messing around.
It's the objectivity as well. I think it's so that strategy and that objectivity as well, Jamie. Like, I just think it's necessary, because not every single body, the beauty of bikini is that no 2 bodies are the same. You bring your own version of that criteria on your frame, and that will look completely different to the next person and the next person. And you can align yourself against athletes that are going to have similar qualities to you to best position yourself to really shine. Whereas, I mean, the Olympia, nobody's hiding, right?
Right.
Nobody can hide at the Olympia. You just got to go and hope for the best. But that kind of strategy, again, that can only foster a level of confidence and self-esteem in the team, because not only are you placing them in a show that's well matched in terms of the people that they're competing against, but then the understanding that you have of that situation in order to put them in the best position to succeed and exceed their expectations as well. That can only foster confidence in an athlete as well, going back to the mindset element.
Yeah, totally. That's very, very true. And, you know, I have a lot of amazing athletes coming on the scene that haven't even stepped on stage yet. So I'm so excited about it. But I do try to, as much as possible, kind of like come in waves with it. So I'm not putting everybody up there at one time.
You're just taking over.
It'll be a FitBody
just like Jami stage. You're owning it.
Jamie's takeover.
Yeah. I think we had 10 Olympians last year. So I'm like, okay, I got big shoes to fill for this year, and it's a shorter year. So you know, because they moved the Olympia up a little bit, so we have a little less time to qualify. So
you're so respected in the industry, and like you said it yourself, you're getting more and more athletes as well. But I suppose going back to like the individual and just touching on the peaks and stuff like that, because it's something that I know Tyler touched on in a video, I think with Maria. He had said that she had nailed her peak. So what do you do differently with those athletes? We did mention in the review about the height things as well, different bodies, you know, different muscularity. Like, how do you approach peaking your athletes? And Amy is someone that we're always like, it's very, very consistent as well, but you might not see that with another athlete. So how do you kind of go about things? Because that is probably one of the most challenging parts of the stage journey, really. So talk us through kind of how you go about that, and any barriers you face, any issues that arise with your athletes.
Yeah, so peaking is interesting. And I think it's important for coaches to have a lot of tools in their toolbox when it comes to peaking athletes, because it is not a one size fits all. The same thing doesn't work for every single athlete. You know, it sometimes takes a couple times to kind of figure out what's going to work best. The thing with Maria, when we started with the Charlotte Pro early in the season, and of course I had Brittany and Maria, and Brittany won, so that was really cool. That was her first Olympia qualification, Brittany Gillespie. Maria was a little flat,
phenomenal
that at that show, and the reason was like a lot with Maria. A lot of times when hey, will you plug this in? I'm getting it. Sorry, my battery's getting low. When the nerves start to kick in with Maria, she starts to burn really, really fast. And that's what happened at Charlotte. Like we were right where we wanted her to be. And then the cortisol levels come up. She just like starts burning. And I actually had her at Clash and she was doing toe touches. I don't know if y'all have seen any of the pictures, but I was like, stop. I'm trying to fill you out. Don't be burning that many calories, please.
Stop using that energy.
But she gets excited and the nerves and everything. And so she's moving and I'm like, I need you just to relax. But it's always fun. To me, I have so much fun with each athlete, and we joke around and play around a lot, but, with her, we've, figured out we just have to keep her really relaxed. I've got to push a little bit more food a little bit earlier. I mean, if you look at her back shot at Charlotte versus the Pittsburgh, it's like day and night different. And that's what he was talking about, because he had just judged her in Charlotte, and gave us that feedback. And I knew, I was like, we weren't as full as we could be. I felt like we were on, but just all those factors played in. And that was my first show with her. That's the first show that I've coached her into. So I learned, how to better handle that going forward. I have another example. I had one athlete who got her pro card last year, and we were at the show and I'm like doing everything I know to fill her out, and she's not filling out. And, sometimes that's when you got to dig into that like toolbox. It's just like, and I just started loading sodium hard, which I don't like to fool around with sodium too much. I like to keep it pretty steady and then just adjust it a little bit here or there, because you can either have a really good effect or it can have not so good effect. So you kind of got to, weigh your pros and cons. But in this case, I'm like, I've got to fill her out. I just got to. So I just started pushing it. And finally I got everything to pop, and then she went and got a pro card, which was cool. But I do think that, every single peaking strategy is a little different. If I have somebody who's got a little bit more thicker waist, or if I start feeding them, they kind of lose a little bit of their tightness in their waist, then I have to start, front loading them early in the week, kind of taper it down. A lot of my other athletes like Amy, like the more I feed her, the tighter her waist gets. So I will feed her on show day. But again, it's just like every single individual is so different. Even the kinds of foods that work well for them during peak week, what's going to digest best for them. For some people, if you pull out their fruits and veggies during the week, they get constipated, and now you've got an issue with that. And for other people, if you have them eating too much fiber, just kind of sitting in their midsection and they don't have, so again, it's just like so individualized and unique for each person. And it's a constant learning process. It's like, how do we get just this much better? And that's what I love about working with these pro athletes, is like, you got to be pretty dang good to get your pro card to start with. And now how do we take that and then make it even better? So sometimes it's body work. I mean, a great example is this past week, and at the Clash, Maria, one of her tie-ins was just gone. And I'm like, okay, you're just all locked up there. So we actually went and had a roller Instacarted and sent over to us, and had her roll it out, break up the adhesions, and then it popped right back in. And similar thing happened to Amy at the Arnold. So just kind of having all these different tools so that you know what to do in different situations, and then some of it's going to be trial and error, what's going to work for the individual.
That's really it, isn't it? That's so much experience, right, though, as well, Jami. I mean, how long have you been doing this with your athletes as well? Have you ever got it wrong? Have you ever sort of swung in and thought, oh no, that didn't work, go again? Is that where that sort of toolbox has been created? Have you ever had an experience with an athlete where you've shot it in the wrong direction and come back and thought, right, okay, never again?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I mean, this is not a perfect science. If it was, then we wouldn't, as coaches, wouldn't exist. And, it is very much, there's no, people are like, oh, where do you go to learn? Like, it's really trial and error. I mean, a lot of this is learning through doing and figuring out what does and doesn't work. And when you've worked with thousands of athletes, you've, picked up tools along the way, figuring out what's going to work for the individual. And there's times where I'm like, I mean, the Pittsburgh Pro last year, I fed Amy so much, and I laid in bed that night staring at the ceiling going, little baby Jesus, please, please let her look good in the morning. Because I knew that it was going to be tough last year to beat, Ashley. And I knew I had to just go for it and hope that it was going to work out. And it did. I mean, she woke up the next morning so full. And I was like, yeah, okay. So that was one day I just didn't feed her much throughout the day. But that's why it's really funny. I had this one girl that I worked with back in the day, and she had posted something, oh, this is me, last year I only ate one rice cake and this year I ate all this food. I'm like, but yeah, every prep's different, so this year I was feeding Amy on show day because I didn't push the food quite as hard because I trusted her body. I knew she wasn't going to be on stage till later in the day, and I knew if I needed to fill her out more on show day, I could still keep her waist tight, whereas last year I did overfill her a little bit, and then I didn't feed her much on show day. So, we've continued to refine and modify, and I feel like this was a little more controllable than what I did last year. Yeah. But again, sometimes you swing for the fences, and
I mean, it's like you said, it's not a perfect science, is it? It's not a perfect science. You can't always get it right, and the body's going to respond differently prep to prep as well. I think like one of my personal friends as well is in exactly the same boat now. She's doing a second prep and everything is different. Her body's responding differently. She's still losing weight and they're trying to fill her, and it's just, there's so many variables that until you've got not just a documented history as a coach in the sport, but a history with that client in particular, with that athlete in particular, you're just gonna generate. I remember watching Amy's YouTube last year actually about the Pittsburgh Pro, and watching her come to life the next day, and it was surreal watching her physique on that stage. What does it feel like personally, Jami, like dealing with the athletes at that level as well, taking those kind of risks? Obviously you said you were staring at the ceiling. How do you manage that as a coach as well, dealing with that kind of pressure and that kind of responsibility, I guess?
Yeah, it's nerve-wracking. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, every weekend I'm like, why do I do this again? Because every weekend, I mean, honestly, it's both. I go into every weekend feeling like, hopeful, excited, worried a little bit too, because I do have so many athletes competing. I know not everybody's going to be happy. So at the end of it, so I know every show, like I'm going to have some people that are elated, and I'm going to have some people that maybe are a little disappointed, and I just don't ever want them to be disappointed. I truly just want them to feel good and be so proud of themselves, and that's truly more important to me than anything. So yeah, it is like, I mean, literally I usually can't eat. Like people are always like, how do you stay so thin? I'm like, I'm just stressed. I know. Once prejudging's over, I'm like, oh my God, I'm starving because I haven't eaten all day, because I felt like my stomach was just like in knots, and the butterflies and everything. But I mean, it was the best compliment I think I've ever gotten is when Amy and I sat down, I think it was at the Olympia last year. And she said, the reason I want you to be my coach is because you're as passionate as I am. And that was such a huge compliment, because I truly am so passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about the athletes I work with. I'm passionate about, coming through for them. And I hold myself to a very high standard. And if something doesn't go right, like I'm doing an after action review, I'm super hard on myself. Like, what could I have done different? And, even if it was the athlete went off their plan or did something, it's like, how could I have supported them better? Could I have checked in on them more? Like, what could I have done? Because at the end of the day, like, that's all I can control is what I do. So it definitely is. But I mean, that's part of the fun too, is, it's like, it literally feels like a roller coaster ride, going up through prejudging. I feel like you're like, you're just getting ready for
the gut drop on the way out.
seriously, I'm like, oh God.
Oh dear.
It is a lot. Like you're putting like people's goals in your hands, like, and they're such big goals at that. Like Amy going for potentially Olympia champion this year. Like that's a lot. You do so much for these people and tapping into their lives and stuff like that. But I suppose like that's your stress. But with the stress of the athlete, like I find it so admirable how they go from show to show, and especially like I know we're touching on Amy a lot, but she's really big on the scene at the moment and working her way up, and even like Maria as well. Like, how do you manage their stress leading into show as well in relation to their peak? Because I know you touched on like things like filling up and sodium and stuff like that, and you can manage food, but how do you manage just like their headspace in peak week if anything does kind of pop up and throw off the look a little bit? And also just in terms of like managing even like the night before, if they are potentially like stressed about eating certain things, if you tell them to fill up or maybe even go for like a meal out. I think Amy touched on that before. Like, how do you manage that kind of stress? Because there's a lot of thoughts going into that big week, especially when it's such a big show.
I really think a big part of it is just the trust that we build. Yeah. So they really trust me when I tell them this is going to be okay to do this. They believe me. You know, and it's trust is built over time, you know, that time and energy and all of that we're put in. So I feel like it's, you know, I'll just call them, connect with them. I mean, and sometimes different things happen. I mean, I actually, as we were talking, I was thinking about last year's Olympia with Amy, and, you know, I think that I didn't nail it for that show. And a lot of it was, I was listening to too much feedback, too much noise, and I didn't bring her in full enough because everybody's like, she's so big, she's so this. And then, you know, I didn't fill her as much. She actually had the flu that week too. So we were doing IVs and other things. So we had other things going on too, but, you know, but then kind of that step away to go, okay, you know, what can we do different? But again, like I said, you know, that got in her head a lot, that she stayed at the same spot. You know, we didn't move, even though there was expectation. So there was a lot of work we had to do on mindset, then going from there to the Arnold, you know, continuing to kind of build on that and reassurance and confidence in what we're doing, and being really clear, this is why we're doing this, you know, so that there's no ambiguity, and like, it doesn't feel like I'm just randomly throwing instructions at them, but just being very, very intentional. And, you know, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, this, and this, and this is the result we're looking for. And when that result starts to happen and they see it, then they start trusting the process, and then, you know, it becomes easier.
Yeah, because especially the likes of Amy, we talked briefly about her career. We've spoken to her, which was an absolute honor, but she was propelled into that pro league so fast. I mean, I know that she made huge improvements from sort of when she actually won her pro physique, because I know that there's a lot of comments about her physique in particular, about it being too big for bikini, and that kind of feedback, not just the judges' feedback, but feedback externally. It's interesting to hear that can affect coaching decisions, not just the athlete. And we speak about it quite frequently, that taking that feedback, no matter where it comes from, the judges is really important. But equally, you've been to them and said, right, you're saying she's not popping. Why? Be specific. And not many coaches, not many athletes dig into that feedback to really get what they're looking for, as opposed to taking it at face value. How do you manage the feedback as well, Jami? Not just from an athlete standpoint in terms of application, but from your perspective as well. How frequently are you looking to apply exactly what they're looking for? And how does your sort of judgment ever overrule that when you know your athlete as well? Because I can imagine that can be quite challenging sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of challenges when it comes to feedback. I mean, we've got a lot of people that are, you know, like you said, externally that are doing reviews and things like that, which I think is really cool. But I think also like there is bias, especially for certain people. This is why I would never do a review. I'm not going to review a show where I have athletes competing, because I know I have too much bias, and I wouldn't want to put down somebody else's athlete, or, you know what I mean? I just don't think that's my place. But I mean, there are those out there doing that. And so I think, you know, it's hard because sometimes I have to protect their mindset. And I'm like, please don't listen to this stuff. Like, if you want to listen after the show, that's fine or whatever, but like, don't do that, because that can be a challenge, is managing, you know, not allowing people to get, you know, thrown off or upset by, you know, something like that. And that does happen a lot. But when it comes to like the judges' feedback, which, you know, obviously is what matters, I want to get feedback from as many judges as possible that are, you know, Olympia level judges. And so, you know, they're really usually good about, you know, having those conversations, entertaining my questions, that kind of thing. And, when we're like, let's talk about the Arnold, like 1 point difference, or even Pittsburgh, 1 point difference. You know what I mean? Like you're splitting hairs at this point. So obviously not all judges are agreeing 100%, or it wouldn't be 50-50,
No.
So a lot of times it's digging. It's like, what does this particular judge like or not like about this athlete? I'm also going to be very strategic as to where I put my athletes once I start learning, what judges resonate more with this particular athlete, that kind of thing. But I mean, I do think that, I think that part of it too, that you have to take into account when you're getting feedback, is that judge is judging you on that day. They may say, let's say a judge says you need more muscle. Well, do you need more muscle? I mean, they might have said and I think they did say to Maria at Charlotte, she needed more muscle. She needed more muscle. She just needed to be filled out more. You know what I mean? So me as a coach, I've got to interpret and filter the feedback. Is it what they're saying? Because they're just telling me what they're seeing. They don't really know what that person's body is capable of, because they're, obviously not dealing with them on a daily basis. So that's one thing, is, being able to interpret it. But then the other thing too to consider is, like, the judges are judging you in comparison with the specific lineup you were next to on that day. So if you just happen to be next to more muscular competitors, you're not going to look as muscular. Let's say Wasatch, where it was Amy and Brittany Hamilton, like Brittany's got a lot of muscle, so Amy, even though I brought Amy in pretty full for that show, kind of knowing, I knew who the lineup was and I knew who was going to probably be her contender. So I brought her in really full and looking a little bit more, and I'm sure you guys saw like the difference versus like the show she did before that, which was San Diego, where I knew she was going to be against a lot smaller, less developed athletes. And there, I didn't bring her in quite as full. So it's very dynamic of going, okay, I'm filtering everything. All right, here's the feedback. Here's who they were next to. Here's, how they were perceiving it. If I need clarity, I'll ask additional questions and try to get a better understanding of, why they saw what they were saying and how I can then modify and translate it. And then I'll go, a lot of times like to put them back in front of the same judge and go, okay, is this what you meant? Like, is this what you were looking for? And if they're like, yes, that was it. Like with Yulia this past weekend, they were like, yes, this is exactly what we wanted from her. I'm like, okay, good, we got it. So it's challenging though, because there's a lot of
moving
interpretation there.
You said it's avoiding making any just rash decisions and throwing something random at somebody because you get that bit of feedback. It could be very easy done. You say, a judge says you need more pop. That could mean anything. That could be more food. It could be more pump. It could be the styling thing. I remember when I competed a couple of years ago, I got told that my upper body was too big. But it wasn't that my upper body was too big. I just definitely needed to build my lower half a little bit more and maybe do less pump up. So I'm thinking in my head, I don't need to grow my upper body, when I definitely did if I wanted to go far. So it's about taking that with a pinch of salt and not, I suppose getting a coach like yourself that's able to say, right, we're just going to take time here to trial something different rather than just like throwing something at somebody like a plan and hoping that it works kind of thing. So I think that's definitely what separates you, is like Amy said, you're so passionate about it and you're willing to dig and take the time to go through that kind of trial and error and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the biggest things I've seen people, like, they'll come to me and they're, judges saying I don't have enough muscle and I don't know, this and that. And I'll start asking them a lot of questions. And, did you water deplete? Did you take diuretics? What did you do? Because a lot of times, like, maybe I'm looking at this athlete and this happens frequently. They're just flat. They're just either they didn't eat enough, they didn't fill out, they didn't have enough sodium. They did some old school water load, water deplete, and then diuretic at the end. And then they just look, like everything's just there's just like nothing. And so a lot, I mean, I've taken, and I'll take somebody like that and turn them pro, like when they were in second call outs, you know what I mean? It's just, maybe they were with a coach that really didn't understand, how to properly bring the best out of that athlete, or they're using protocols that somebody did with them 10 years ago or whatever. And I mean, there's so many people now that call themselves a coach. They've done one show or, that kind of thing. Like it's, or maybe they have a great educational background and understand physiology and understand endocrinology and some of these other things really well, because there's some really knowledgeable coaches out there, but they don't necessarily have the eye for bikini. Maybe they're better suited and they do well with men or with figure with other divisions or whatever. So it's just kind of an interesting, kind of world of this bodybuilding
balance.
world is. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think the nuances of bikini, we would argue it's one of the most challenging divisions, in my opinion, to actually judge and to nail that physique. Because like we've already said, the level and the differences in the physiques side by side are so different. But then what you're trying to bring isn't just condition. It isn't just muscle size and muscle density. It's not a shape as such. That shape is going to look completely different on every single athlete, and then the difference in terms of filling that frame out. What would you say the sort of division criteria, not the criteria as is set out on paper, but what the judges are lending themselves to at the moment, would you say that's changed since the introduction, Jami, or is it exactly the same, but the bodies and the physiques have developed over time, as in like muscle density and sort of the age of the athletes, the entry level, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say in bikini, it's changed since its inception, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
definitely feel like, it's become more athletic. It's become, in the beginning, it was kind of almost like a model, sort of fitness model sort of thing. But now it's more of an athletic sort of thing. And they keep updating the criteria every year. So I think they're really good about staying on top of that. I do think that they are very focused on making sure that bikini stays where it is now, so that it doesn't continue to grow and get bigger, or, evolve in that sort of way. And it is hard because when your top athletes are continuing to train and to grow and they're your top athletes, I mean, that's what we saw happen with figure. So it is challenging, but it's what, I will say this, but one of the cool things, I was literally just talking to Sandy about this past week, is that if you look at figure, they've actually brought it down a little bit.
They have.
Yeah,
The
which is cool.
size and the level of muscularity is not as, the shape's being awarded more than the actual size and muscularity, which ultimately is what we're here to do, really, isn't it? It's an aesthetically driven sport. It's supposed to look aesthetically pleasing. So yeah, it's been nice to see.
Yeah, so I'm super happy with that. So I know that as an organization, like, they're very focused on keeping the integrity of the divisions as they are currently. And I like seeing that, and it is tough on our part as coaches, because we do have to keep an eye on our athletes and make sure we're not going past, what that division is designed to look like. But what you said is absolutely true. Like, every individual is different. Their strengths are different. Their weaknesses are different. Their body types are different. And what's fun about bikini is you can have, different structures, different body types, and still do well in the division. You can change up posing, you can change up, balance and symmetry by the way you're training. Like, there's so many things that can be done. But we do get to a place where we can't, like, push and train as hard as maybe we once did, because we got to stay now within the criteria.
Yeah.
And before we wrap this up, I suppose you touched on it briefly moments ago about kind of social media, and I think it's so big right now, and reviews are being done, and there's just loads of athletes sharing their progress and stuff. How do you manage that with your athletes, just like with comparison and stuff like that, and leading into big shows, what people are actually saying and how easy it is for people to kind of get in their head? Like, how do you manage that?
That truly is one of the hardest things. Like, there's so many wonderful things about social media, and I think one of the things is that it's helped us grow. Our organizations help us grow our sport. So I think it's really amazing and wonderful, and I love that people are promoting it, talking about it, sharing their journeys. Like, I think it's so amazing. At the same time, like, we do have to, like, have our little bubble when we're in prep and we're competing. Like, we got to kind of protect our mindset and our hearts, because some of it can be really hurtful. Like, people will say things, and I think sometimes people forget these are human beings, like, that have their own insecurities, that have their own, like, they just, like, it's, we kind of look at this person almost like they're like a celebrity, or they're just like, you know what I mean? Like, they're just, and so that can be really tough. I mean, yeah. So I mean, I encourage, it depends on the person. I mean, I have some people that doesn't faze them, that they're just like, whatever, just like a duck. It just kind of goes off their back. And then I have
Yeah.
other people that can ruminate on it and start kind of going down the rabbit hole with it, and then start getting in their heads. Even looking at like other athletes that are going to be competing, I'm like, you don't know what they're going to look like on show day. Just, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm hearing from, especially at the national level, oh my God, this person's doing this show. They're going to be in my class. And oh my God. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, you just got to focus on you being your best that day. I mean, you don't know like the lighting they're taking those pictures in, the angles. They're taking 20 pictures and picking the best ones. Sometimes they're editing them, you know. So,
Yep.
you know,
Editing, yes. I was gonna say the structure button. It
yes, like a
happens.
lot of that's going
It
on. Yeah,
happens.
just, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's the thing. Or even going in, like, it's like, I remember doing this as an athlete too. If you go into check-ins, you know, and like, oh my God, she looks, oh, look at her shoulders. Oh my gosh, look, you know, and you could start doing that kind of thing. I have a lot of times I'll tell my athletes, just cover up. Just cover up.
Yeah.
You don't need to, you
Yeah.
know, go in, do your check-ins, just be chill, you know, kind of like you just go and you show it to them on show day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it just depends on the individual and how much they're influenced by it. And, you know, if they really are, I'm like, can we just stay off for just a little while, just until after the
Yeah.
show? And then if you want to go read everything, you can.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to protect, you've said it, and I know Amy mentioned her bubble as well. Like, that's just given me like a bit of familiarity with the conversation with her. And I think it's important as an athlete to remember that you're doing this for yourself. Like, you're getting on stage for yourself. You are bringing your best self. Like, you're working on yourself day in, day out, not just from a physical standpoint, but from a mental standpoint as well. There's so much of this that feeds into you to get to the end, or to get to that show day and be absolutely consumed with the external as opposed to the internal. It would be complete sacrilege. Like, it's not right. It's for you. You get on stage for you. So anybody listening, get on stage for you. Adopt Jamie's bubble. Keep everybody out.
Music to my ears. And you're 100% right. Like, this, just remember, it's for you. This is for you. This is for you to showcase all of your hard work, to get up there, to be proud of yourself. Like, you know, you can't control the outcome or what the judges, you know, like that day or see that day, or what other athletes show up and how good they look. Like, you know, we go to national shows, and you might have one class where you've got girls in second call outs that could have won any other class. It just happens to be that class was that good. So those are the things you can't control. So you've got to just show up, be your best, take your feedback, keep working, you know, and have fun in the process, make friends, get connected, like, make it about more than just the winning or the placing. And then there'll be a lot more joy that comes out of it.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's something that
Sure.
builds over time as well. The more you do, maybe when you initially, you know, start the sport, you're very consumed by it and the comparison and the social media. But, you know, I think that's why we look up to these pros, is because they have that bulletproof mindset in a lot of areas as well. So we can always learn from them. But I guess to wrap it up, like, what would be your biggest, I suppose, do's and don'ts, biggest piece of advice for, you know, amateur bikini athletes who want to take the next level, who want to turn pro and be as good as your athletes? What we'll touch on the don'ts, like what would be your biggest thing to kind of avoid on their journeys?
I mean, I think doing your research and getting a good coach, especially if you're first getting started, I think is really important. And you know, when I say do your research, like, I would reach out to other people that have been coached by that coach and see what their experience has been like. I mean, what's really cool about right now, as opposed to when I was doing this, is there's so much more information out there. You know, there's podcasts, there's, you know, there's just a lot more information. There's a lot easier ways to connect. So I would just say, like, the biggest thing is, like, do your homework, you know, get some good guidance. And hey, if you know, you try one thing, it's not working for you, it's okay to switch. Like, it's okay to do that. I mean, obviously we talk about, like, you want to allow somebody enough time to get to know your body and things like that, but you also need to make sure you're resonating and you're feeling supported by whoever it is, you know, that's guiding you on your journey. And then, you know, take your time, be present, like, really, you know, enjoy all the steps, like the journey, not just, you know, just the stage part. I think that a lot of times when people focus so much on the stage and the outcome, then the post-show blues are really bad. Sometimes the food relationship with food can go downhill. So if you can find a way to integrate this into your life, and enjoy the journey, I feel like the long term is going to be a better experience, because the amateurs that they want to cram it in there, do a 12-week prep, even though they have 20 pounds to lose, and they get up on stage, maybe they don't have the outcome they want, and they just start binging, and it just turns into that's like the situations I always want to see us avoid, because then those people don't ever want to do it again because they didn't have a good experience.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Because it's so catastrophic, and it is catastrophic not only for that individual but for the sport as well, because that's not a true reflection of what this can be. It's not a true reflection of what your experience can be. And I think a lot of it is hard and fast sort of achievements that want to be made in the sport now, because it is so visible, because people, the glitz and the glamour of the stage and actually getting there is almost the bit that people, not always, not in every case, but you forget to appreciate what goes into that final day, because it's everything before that and everything leading up to that makes that day special. It's not just a magical day, it's everything that you've done leading up to that point. But Jami, this has been incredible, absolutely phenomenal. Where can people find you? Where can we signpost you to yourself, your coaches, FitBody Fusion, anything like that? Where can we find you? Where can we send our listeners?
I keep it so simple. So fitbodyfusion.com is the website. Our coaches are truly amazing. We literally do weekly educational calls. We do weekly office hours where we all get together. We analyze our athletes. We figure out how to get better, how to make them better. So, we have an amazing program. So if you're interested in a consultation, you can just fill out the consultation form and talk to one of our coaches. My social media, everything is FitBody Fusion. So Instagram's kind of our main platform, I would say. And we do have our podcast, which is the FitBody Lifestyle Podcast. So check that out. And I'm just Jami D. Bernard on all platforms, JamiDeBernard. No E on Jami. So that's it.
And it's just amazing.
And it is Jami.
Like it's hard to keep up because of all the wins and just everything that's going on. But what a year, such exciting things ahead for you and the team, and we just can't wait to see more of these promising athletes come up, and best of luck to them all.
Yeah, and well done.
Thank you. And
Jami,
I'm so honored to be here.
Yeah. No, honestly, well done as well. The work that you're putting in, the passion and the attitude and everything that you bring, I can feel it here. So well done for advocating as hard as you do for your athletes, because it does show, and it is, and they're shining and they're succeeding, and it's
needed in this sport,
a byproduct of your work. It really is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.